What's up, everyone? I'm Brody Vinson, and I'm the host of Profession Session, a podcast where I talk to professionals of all different types, whether it be corporate stars, entrepreneurs, business owners, and get to the bottom of what's allowed them to be so successful so far in their respective areas. I do a breakdown every 5 interviews that I do just to talk about the main things that I learned from each interview about what it means to be a professional and how to be successful in a particular area. And today I'm going to be breaking down interviews 21 through 25. Number 21, I interviewed Zach Hoevelman, who's the owner of an insurance agency. And he had a very interesting business model, so that one's definitely worth checking out if you haven't yet. You can learn a lot about not only that industry, but a very unique business model that he's come up with that's been very successful for him so far. But the main thing I want to focus on in this interview that I gleaned from talking to Zach was just this concept of work-life balance. This is something that Zach went through personally. He had a really tough time in his earlier career life just figuring out how to slow down a little bit and bring himself a little bit of balance. And he was having all kinds of negative stuff happen, like panic attacks, insomnia, stress, and relational issues as a result of this. And he actually ended up having some family and friends reach out to him and just let him know that they wanted him to work on it, and he was able to kind of crawl it back and just find more balance for himself by putting some strong boundaries in place. The thing that this made me think about is I also have a tendency to just have this tunnel vision where I just want to keep working, going towards this goal that I've set for myself with my work. And I now am a little more conscious about some of the downstream effects of that. And I've been actively working on trying to set different boundaries, whether it be stopping work at a certain time of the day or just setting in little breaks during the day just to wind down a little bit and try not to let that affect me too much. Number 22 that I did was my good friend Blake Lindquist. He is a landscape designer, so working on getting his landscape architecture license and practicing in that field. He's been incredibly successful as a creative in general. He does a lot of art as well. That's his background, undergrad in the study of art, and then he got his master's in landscape architecture. The main thing that I kind of gleaned from this interview that's kind of stuck with me is just this concept of how he sees himself as a creative. Really, he talked about as a creative in his field being very observant of different elements of all kinds of other creative things around him, whether it be art or music or design from some different thing, and just taking his favorite elements from multiple different things and combining those to make something new and artistic. So I thought that was a really cool perspective on being a creative, and it's something I'm kind of factoring into the way I do this podcast. It's been an incredible creative outlet for me personally, and I now think about being a creative in the podcast in a little bit different lens, and that was really cool. Now, the next interview that I did was my friend Amani Youssef, and this was actually a repeat interview. She was my 5th interview as well. That one had a lot more about her background, so check that out if you haven't. But this one got into a little bit more of what she's working on now with her new company. And one thing that stuck with me that Amani said in this interview, she talked about how there's a lot of people that are working in some kind of area that they really don't enjoy, and they go in upset, grumpy, and that affects different aspects of your life. The thing that she wanted to emphasize here was just you need to find something that actually excites you and that you actually enjoy in your work if you really want to get your best work. So I've thought a lot about that, and being in the kind of entrepreneurial space myself, you know, there's always all kinds of things being thrown at me, different tasks, different opportunities. And I tend to be a little bit of a yes man with a lot of it, but I'm trying to, after thinking about this, be just a little more intentional about the things that actually excite me and that I enjoy doing in my work, because I have noticed that I get my best work doing those things. So I'm trying to be a little more intentional about putting boundaries around the things I don't want to do. Now, that's easier said than done. Obviously, you're going to have to do things you don't want to do sometimes. It's just part of the landscape of being a business owner and entrepreneur. But I've been trying to find more creative ways to delegate some of those tasks that I don't want to do, or the things that kind of get in the way of me doing the things that I ultimately currently want to be working on the most. And I think that's important, just trying to figure out how to creatively push yourself in the direction of doing more of what you want to do in your work. The 24th interview that I did was with the owner of a new local dog bar that opened here in town in Orlando, downtown Orlando, called Pups Pub. This is actually the second location, first one in Tampa. They opened recently, and I've been kind of a frequent visitor because I have a dog, and it's an incredible concept. So I wanted to talk to the owner about just what it was like opening it. Definitely check out that interview because this was a fascinating story. They're really leading this dog bar concept, in my opinion, and there's a lot that comes along with breaking into and really creating and forging a new industry. One thing that really stuck with me a lot from this interview is Alex's answer to a question that I ask in every interview now. And that question is just, what does it mean to you personally to be a professional? Alex's answer was just having accountability in your work, following through on what you said you were going to do. This is so important. I think if you promise anything of someone in your professional life, if you say you're going to do something, you got to follow through. And this is something I've always tried to emulate and to try to bring into my professional life. But I just wanted to emphasize this point because no matter what you do as a profession, it is just so important to follow through with what you said you're going to do and be accountable when there are things that happen along the way that are unexpected that you have to follow up on. Take it all the way through and be accountable for what you said you're going to do. The 25th interview that I did was with Bianca Rist, who is essentially a real estate investor developer now, but her background was in insurance. She actually at one point had a team of over 100 people working for her on her team. And so there's a lot of really interesting stuff around that. And also a lot of really interesting stuff about real estate investing. So definitely check that one out. The main thing I walked away from with this interview actually had nothing to do with insurance, building a team, or real estate at all. It was more of a general tip. And she had this point about finding a running mate for any kind of endeavor that you're pursuing in your professional life. And she described a running mate as just someone that you can bounce things off of and that can be a sounding board for anything that you're going through. So if you're in a new job, if you're starting a new business, trying to learn something new, get some new certification, you should always try to have someone that's going through something similar, ideally in the same stage as you, that you can just bounce things off of, because you can always get a different perspective, kind of step outside of your own biases and preconceived notions and just get a different perspective that lends itself to you growing as a professional and whatever that pursuit is. So I thought that was a really awesome tip. It's something I'm trying to make sure I always have in any pursuit that I'm going after that is new for me. So that has been my biggest tips and lessons from interviews 21 through 25 of Profession Session. Thank you so much for tuning into this. Really happy to have you as a listener or watcher. If you enjoyed this breakdown, I'm curious to hear in the comments if you have any particular tips that you learned from any of these interviews that stuck out to you that you'd like to share. So go ahead and drop those in the comments, like and subscribe. And until next time, thanks for tuning into Profession Session. Thanks so much for tuning into Profession Session. I'm your host, Brody Vinson. Stay tuned for new episodes every week and short clips of deep dives into specific topics that I put out on different social media channels. We can be found on YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, TikTok, all major podcast platforms. You can find my guest in the details of this video or podcast. And if you happen to know a young standout business owner, professional, or entrepreneur that you think would be a good fit for Profession Session, DM me or get in contact with me anywhere. Just let me know. And they could be the next to tell their story here. Until next time, again, this has been Profession Session. Stay focused, stay hustling, and stay networking.